Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to MoAn. If you guys are new here, then what is up? My name's Erica. Heya, how you doing? And if you're into the history of the ancient Greeks and the Romans, maybe you're just into the mythology and maybe you're one of those people that heard the name Diomedes and you were like, I want to know more about that guy. Well, then this is not only the video for you, but this is also the channel for you. You guys are going to want to hit that subscribe button and that bell icon so you know every single time I post in the future. But on to the topic of today's video. As you can see from the title, we're going to be discussing book 5 of Homer's Iliad. So if you haven't watched book 4, if you haven't watched my summary of book 4, maybe you only need to watch book 5 for class, I don't even know. But I would advise that you watch book 4 just because a lot of what happens in this book is primarily based on that. Only because we get a lot of themes that pop up in that book, we get a lot of action sort of sequences that do then replicate in this book. So I would advise it. You don't have to, obviously it can't make you do anything, but it might make this book make a little bit more sense. But if I'm gonna summarize book 5 into a sentence, which I've been doing at the beginning of every single video, it will be that Diomedes is a badass. That's it, that's the summary. Now there is a lot that happens in this book outside of Diomedes. It's one of the longer chapters of Homer's Iliad. However, due to time constraints, I'm just gonna be focusing on Diomedes' actual action. So I will be noting like, oh, here there were more battle scenes, there were more deaths here or whatever. So you can go and find them. But primarily the most important thing that you take away from this is that Diomedes ends up just doing a lot, and he does a lot basically. So let's just dive into the narrative and let's get this ball rolling. So we're still in the same battle that we were in at the end of book 4, right? But now Athena's getting involved and she actually goes to Diomedes and she gives him all this courage and this burning passion for war, which is unsurprising. She's the goddess of warcraft, okay? So she literally even guides Diomedes like into the center of battle because that's where like the majority of people are struggling, obviously the middle of war. She ends up guiding him in there and immediately like he steps into this like battle, like mini battle within the battle, and these two guys on a chariot on the Trojan side immediately see him and they're just like, we're gonna kill that dude. Their names are not important. They do give you like their names, your names, they give you their names, but also Homer does tell you like their lineage. It's not important for this video, but you can go find it in the book if you so need it. However, they're in the chariot, okay, and they're like riding towards Diomedes, and Diomedes is like, not on my watch. However, this guy does shoot a spear at Diomedes before he can attack first. So the guy, because in the chariots, as I've said before, hence why I said you should watch episode, but the 4th one even, not episode, it would be episode 5, whatever, it doesn't matter. You should watch that episode because chariots in the Trojan War, that there were 2 of them in the chariot, one would drive and one would attack. So the guy who's attacking in that chariot throws his spear at Diomedes. And as Diomedes is walking forward, he sort of like skirts out the way and it goes right over his left shoulder. And Diomedes is mad now. Like he was ready for war before. Now he's pissed off. So he picks up his spear and fires it at this guy. It obviously hits him and he ends up like leaning, he's dead. So he like flops over the side of the chariot. But for those of you who don't know, chariots are super unstable. Okay, they've got 2 wheels and they've got 2 guys in it. And then you've got horses which are, that would be correct, which are literally driving these things. So they're not stable at all. So when he flops over the side, the other guy is then taken with him and the whole chariot. So they're all sort of flopped over. The horses are let go of. It's a whole thing. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is because this is the first time that the god Hephaestus shows up on the battlefield. And he actually saves the second guy from dying in this moment. He's like, oh no, I actually like this guy. And so he comes down to help him, but the first guy that Diomedes shot, obviously he's dead. And I also wanted to mention this because the horses, as they are running off, they are actually caught by the Greeks and they're brought back to the camp. And that's also part of the war booty that is involved in this whole battle. That not only are you looking for the armor, not only are you looking for the bodies, but you're also looking for the horses. The horses, great little addition to your prizes. So they then get some of the horses and they bring them back to the Greek. Now, Athena is watching this happen, and she notices that this was far too smooth on the Trojan side in order for this battle to, well, this little altercation to have gone this way. And so she knows that Ares must have had something to do with it. So she's like, let me go find him. She then leaves the Greeks to go and find Ares, and she brings him outside of the battle for a hot second, and she's like, look, this is getting a little bit unfair. This is now just being God against God rather than mortals against mortals. Do you want to just sit this one out and like let Zeus just handle the whole battle and we can just watch? And Ares doesn't say anything. This is also important. Ares barely says a goddamn word in this entire book. And in this moment, he just sort of nods and he's just like, whatever, but he doesn't say anything. It's more like with his eyes. He's like, fine. And so he then and Athena go and sit on the banks of the Scamandros River and they just watch the battle. That's what they're going to do. They're not going to actively get involved. After this, there's a lot of killing, lots and lots of killing from other characters, like Agamemnon, Menelaus, Odysseus gets involved, like all of them get involved, Ajax as well, but I'm not going to be going into them because we've been mentioning a lot of different battle scenes. But back to Diomedes, because Diomedes is still on the battlefield being a bad man. In fact, he's noted as being such a storm on the battlefield that apparently, according to Homer, that if you're looking from the outside in, it would be tough to tell what side he's on just because he's a hurricane down there. Like, apparently he's insane. But obviously this can't just like go smoothly. So Diomedes ends up encountering Pandarus, the goat killer, right? The guy with the goat arrow archer thing, that guy. He ends up, well, not like face to face encountering him, but he ends up encountering him because Pandarus is a little bit further back because he is an archer, so he doesn't have to be on the front lines. If you know anything about battle, that makes perfect sense. If not, then that might not make sense. But so Pandarus ends up shooting Diomedes, and it gets him like right in the shoulder, like right on the top of his shoulder. And Pandarus is obviously like, yeah, look how amazing I am. I just shot Diomedes, this guy who's tearing everybody up. Well, he doesn't say Diomedes, but he says, I just shot this guy who I think looks like Tydeus' son, which makes me really happy. He's like rejoicing with the Trojans, all that sort of shebang, and we cut to Diomedes, who's just staring at this thing coming out of his shoulder, and Sthenelus, who walks over and just pulls this arrow out of his shoulder, and blood is described as like Quentin Tarantino-esque, like it just pops up, it like explodes, and Diomedes is like, oh, that's a pain. It's this that causes Diomedes to pray to Athena, though. Remember how she stepped out? He now prays to Athena, and he's like, look, if you were ever with my father when he was in war, then you'll be with me now. So please come and help me. I really want to kill this idiot that just shot me. Like, come and help. Lucky for him, Athena does hear him, and Athena loves Diomedes. So Athena shows up, and she like, it's described that she basically makes his limbs like really light, and he feels like airy almost. And she takes away the mist that's in front of his eyes, so now he can see on the battlefield who's a god and who's not a god. And she tells him that too. She's like, look what I just gave you. And on top of that, she also then gives him the strength of his father, the strength and the courage of his father. And she's like, now you have literally no reason to not tear everybody apart on the battlefield. You've got Tydeus's courage, you've got Tydeus's strength, you know who's a god and who isn't. Oh, and on that note, she like adds a little like fine print. She's like, you're not allowed to attack any deity. That's not allowed, unless it's Aphrodite, in which case you can stab her because we hate her right now. But no one else, which honestly is a pretty good deal. So naturally Diomedes is like, sweet, peace out. And he goes back into battle. Unsurprisingly, he's got this massive rage now for battle, like this massive passion, more so than he had before. So he goes on this whole killing spree. Like, I'm not gonna go into it, but he kills multiple people over the next like couple of pages. That's all he does. He just gets there, he's mad, kills everyone. And while this is going on, back closer to like the Trojan camps, the Trojan city, Aeneas, who is one of the best swordsmen of Troy, he's the second actually to Hector, so he's like the next best. So he sees all of this happening, and he's like, who the hell is that guy, and how is he killing all of my men? So he goes to find Pandarus, because Pandarus, once again, he's a very famous archer. So he goes to find him, and he's like, I don't know who that dude is, but you need to kill him. You need to shoot that guy down there. And obviously Pandarus is like, funny you should say that, I actually have stabbed him, and he didn't budge. I always think this is such a funny conversation, because then he highlights how he actually also did the same to Menelaus. And he's like, I just made Menelaus more mad, I made Agamemnon more mad. So I don't know if this whole bow thing is really working out for me. Aeneas hears them, and he suggests, why don't the two of us go into battle then? If your bow isn't that great, we can go in with spears, and one of us even, not necessarily me, I can go and drive us in on the chariot, and I have these great horses. He talks about his great horses, which were handed down from his father. And so they then agreed to go in as a duo into the battle. So they end up agreeing that Aeneas is going to drive the horses because they are his father's horses, and Pandarus is going to be the attacker. So they get in the chariot and they go straight for Diomedes because they're not fussed with anyone else. They just want to kill Diomedes. Diomedes doesn't actually see them first. It's Sthenelus who sees them first. And Sthenelus like hits Diomedes, and he's like, you're gonna want to see this chariot coming in because that dude, aka Aeneas, that dude is amazing, and you do not want to fight him. Like, he's gonna kill us, especially combined with the goat killer. He obviously doesn't say goat killer, I say goat killer, but he's like, especially combined with Pandarus, you do not want to fight these two. And Diomedes very respectfully turns to Sthenelus and is just like, never encourage me not to go into battle again because I'm gonna go do it. And he does say that it's because Athena has given him all of this courage that even if he were to say no and he were to take Sthenelus' advice, he would still like be encouraged to go in by Athena. Like, Athena wouldn't let him sit on the sidelines, so he's like, I'm gonna go and fight these dudes. Now, it's your job to get the horses because I like the look of those horses. I want them back home with me in August, so you're gonna grab them when I kill these dudes. Got it? And Sthenelus is like, got it. And so now they have their double act set up, which Sthenelus is now going to steal the horses, and Diomedes is going to kill them. Like, Diomedes wants at least one of these horses. Obsessed with the horses. Our point of view switches then, and we get the point of view from the chariot. And we've got Aeneas and Pandarus, they're riding in, and Pandarus feels like now's the time to make a great speech. And he literally yells at Diomedes and is like, hey, you know how I tried to shoot you with that arrow and you literally didn't even give a shit? Well, I'm back now and I have a spear. Why you would say this to someone you're about to attack is beyond me. Especially someone as terrifying as Diomedes. Like, wouldn't you want the element of surprise? Hide your weapon. I don't know. Like, you don't want him to know that you're coming to attack him. Meanwhile, they're just like, hello, just so that you know, you can now take cover if you so need. Objectively a bad move. So Pandarus then throws his spear at Diomedes, and it's described as going straight through his shield. And I want to highlight that because we've now had a bunch of different descriptions about spears going straight through shields, and we need to remember that in book 3, when Paris tried to do the same, his spear bounced off. So it's not actually that difficult to get your spear through someone's shield, and yet Paris could do it. But either way, Pandarus does it. He then gets it through Diomedes' shield. It then doesn't like stab Diomedes, it like gets his armor though. And so Pandarus is then like, whoa, I hit him. And Diomedes is like, hate to break it to you, but you didn't actually hit me. You missed, loser. Like, once again, like, why are we having this terrible trash talk? So Diomedes then throws his spear at Pandarus, who's still riding towards him, and Athena helps guide the spear. Now, this is important because this is a brutal death by even the Iliad standards. So Diomedes throws the spear, and how I imagine it is it's gone in sort of like a loop, because Homer describes it, I have to shift to the side. Homer describes it as going like up and down right here. So it goes between the eye and the nose. And it's described as going in a downward motion through the teeth and the tongue and the bottom of the jaw. It's like come like this is how the spear has come to him, which, holy crap, is brutal. Even when you're reading it, you're like, oh my God. And it just goes straight through the front part of his face. And so Pandarus, go kill her, he's now dead. But Diomedes doesn't stop there. No, he can't just have one death in the chariot. He then picks up a rock. Remember how I said last time that rocks are used? So he picks up a rock, but he picks up like nearly a boulder. Like, one person is not supposed to pick up this thing. Like, Homer literally tells us that, like, it's far too big. And it's because Diomedes is so great and so powerful. And he ends up throwing it at Aeneas, and it hits Aeneas in his cup socket. That's how you translate it. So it's like the hip joint. I'm not a doctor. I don't know what that actually is called, but it hits him right there. And so then Aeneas is pinned to the ground, and he's like wailing. He's in so much pain, like his hip is shattered at this point. And Diomedes is like walking towards him because he's going to literally thrash him up. But luckily, Aphrodite then sees this happening, and Aphrodite is actually Aeneas's mother. So she swoops down and she picks him up. She's like, that's my baby, not on my watch. So she starts to fly away with him, and Diomedes comes at her and stabs her. The rule from Athena was that he could stab Aphrodite. So he does. He just stabs her like through her robes. It's described as through her robe, so it actually gets to her. And she's like, whoa! And she's in so much pain that she drops Aeneas. And as she drops Aeneas, then Apollo sort of swoops in and he picks up Aeneas. But Aphrodite is like, what the just happened? And she books it. She then goes to find Ares. Now, in this time, though, before we cut to what happens with Ares and Aphrodite, that Sthenelus, in case you were wondering, he does end up getting the horses from the chariot that Aeneas just fell out of. So they do get the horses, and the horses are brought back to the Greek camp. So, like, fab, Sthenelus did deliver on his only role in this whole altercation. However, back to Aphrodite, she ends up flying to go see Ares. And this is one of my favorite things, because she shows up and she's like crying, she's in pain, like literally her clothes are in tatters at this point because she was stabbed, and so she has all her blood on her clothing and everything. Iris comes down as well and is like, holy crap, Aphrodite has been hit, this is insane, like this has literally never happened before where a mortal has attacked a god, this is a very important moment. She's like crying to Ares, but Ares is described as violent Ares was sitting. And it just, the image to me is so weird that he's so violent. This is a man who, bear in mind, hasn't said anything the entire time. And he's so angry that he's sitting down. Surely if he was that mad, he would be pacing. Like Apollo was in book 1. Apollo was pacing because Apollo's pissed. Ares, he just keeps getting like told what to do. And then he just goes, okay. And he goes and does it. And so now he's sitting down, and Aphrodite comes, shows up and is like crying to him. And, you know, Iris is like trying to comfort her, and she then begs to Ares. She's like, I need to go to Olympus, but I don't have any way of getting there. Can I please use your horses? And Ares nods. He doesn't even say anything to her. Violent Ares sitting just nods. It's just, once again, a very odd image. So Aphrodite gets into that chariot with Iris. They then go up to Olympus, where she ends up seeing her mother, who's this woman called Dione. She sees Dione and she starts crying to Dione and she's like, oh my God, stabbed. And she's like crying her eyes out and Dione is comforting her. Aphrodite has been crying this whole time that she doesn't think that the mortals are fair and she doesn't want to fight when the mortals are being like this and someone has to handle Diomedes. And Dione is like, I mean, I don't know what you want me to tell you because a lot of us have to deal with mortal shit, and this is just an example of you having to deal with a mortal shit, so you're just gonna have to get over and get back on the battlefield if that's what you want to do. Like, I can't do anything about it, but I will pat your hair and make you feel better now if that helps. Which, in comparison to Thetis in book 1, this is how you want a mother to react. You want her to say, here are all the examples of the other gods that have to put up with mortal shit. So we're not going to make special rules just for you. Whereas Thetis, obviously Achilles is crying and she's like, I'm going to bend the world for you. Now, because we're on Olympus, it's not just Aphrodite, Iris, and what's her face? Dione. I just said her name and I forgot it. It's not just the three of them in the room. That actually in the room is like all the other gods. Why they're all hanging out in the same room, I don't know. But Athena and Hera are there and they start making fun of Aphrodite to Zeus, which again is a choice when she's sitting in the room. Athena starts saying that, like, you know, Aphrodite doesn't usually get involved in wars, and she decided to move this beautiful woman to this guy that she really likes in Troy, and look where it got her, like, she's stabbed now. And even Zeus smiles at this. Even Zeus is sort of like, I guess she is learning her lesson. So even he smiles and he turns around to Aphrodite and he says, look, like, I feel for you, but at the same time, you should really be staying in your godly lane. So maybe you should be focusing on the secrets of marriage more so than fighting. Leave the fighting to Athena and to Ares because they're both war gods. Now, the secrets of marriage, by the way, that's sex. That's literally what she's the goddess of, and love. So love, sex, that's what she's god of. And she doesn't retort, she doesn't say anything. She just cries even more to her mother. So Aphrodite gets shut up and then we move back to the battlefield. And back on the battlefield, Diomedes is still stalking his way towards Aeneas because bear in mind, Aeneas, as we left him, he's held now by Apollo. So he advances 3 times on Apollo. Diomedes is advancing 3 times on this god. And remember, he's not allowed to stab another god unless it was Aphrodite. So he advances on Apollo. Apollo's like, off man. And then he advances again. And Apollo's like, really, dude, I just told you to leave me alone. And he advances a 3rd time. And Apollo's like, dude, step off. Like, what is going on? He advances a 4th time. And Apollo loses his shit and just turns around and is like, what is wrong with you? Leave me alone. And because he freaks out, Diomedes then is like, all right, I'll give you some space. I need you to just chill the fuck out, man. Which then gives Apollo time to take Aeneas away from the battlefield. And so he takes him to his sister, Artemis, and his mother, Leto. So they're the ones who then end up healing Aeneas because remember, he's been crushed by a rock. As Aeneas is getting healed though, Apollo then goes to find Ares, who's still in the same spot. He's still violent Ares sitting. So now another god goes to him and Apollo is like, hey man, you're literally the god of war. You know what we could really use right now? We could use you shutting up Diomedes and like attacking him because that would really help us because he won't stop attacking the gods. And Ares again doesn't say a word. He just goes, takes on the guise of a Thracian, and he goes down to the Trojan side to start encouraging them to go back into battle. Now, I actually wasn't going to include this bit. This is going to make the video a little bit longer, and that's only because there is a MoAn viewer who has been watching from like day 1. Shout out to you. He did ask me specifically if I could give Sarpedon the time of day, and so we're going to include a little Sarpedon moment. So Sarpedon is on the Trojan side, and he is the son of Zeus. So in this moment, when Ares is rallying up all of the Trojans, as a Thracian. Bear in mind, he's taken on the guise of a Thracian. Sarpedon stands up because Hector is present. So Sarpedon stands up and he yells at Hector and he says, dude, you're the leader of all of us. Why is this dude trying to rally us up and why haven't you done anything? And in fact, it's a really interesting scene because he says that Hector had been boastful beforehand. So he's sort of exhibiting the same behavior that Paris had exhibited, that Helen sort of got on Paris's case for, where he was saying, you know, before this even happened, you said that you could protect Troy with just, you know, your siblings and you guys could do it single-handedly, and yet you have people like me and people like this dude, because he doesn't know it's Ares, people like this dude who have to come and rally up all of your soldiers. Like, what the hell is that about? And this actually really hurts Hector. And so he gets up and he does his part in rallying up the Trojans, and then they all ride off into battle. So bear in mind that Ares is now on their side on the battlefield. He's down there, and Aeneas has now been healed, and so he then gets dropped into the battle as well. So everybody is down there. Now, there's a very large section where there's a lot of fighting in regards to Agamemnon, Odysseus, Ajax. Again, lots of deaths are happening. We're not going into that because I'm mentioning Sarpedon. But right at the end of this, we have Diomedes show up and he sees Ares on their side in disguise, on the Trojan side, and he bricks because he's like, holy crap, like now we're in trouble. Like this isn't just, you know, like the god of prophecy showing up and like wanting to fight. This is the war god now on the other side. And Diomedes is like, absolutely not. So he turns around and he tells all of them, because remember, he doesn't have the mist. So he tells them, I can see that's Ares, and we are in trouble. And to back this up, lots of deaths happen. But as they embark on their little killing spree, we then get dropped into action again with Sarpedon. He is noted as coming into contact with Hercules' son. Now, because this is YouTube, I'm just going to be saying Hercules, when technically Heracles is the Greek version of the name and Hercules is the Roman version of the name, but no one knows him by Heracles, so there's just no point. So Hercules, though, he comes into contact with Hercules' son, who goes under this name. It's going to be dropping up, whichever. I don't really know how to pronounce it because it's a TL sound. He pops up. So they then come face to face in battle, and they're like, ooh, both of our dads are really good. I mean, you know, one of them is the king of the gods and the other one is just Hercules, so like technically the grandson, so he's not as great as Sarpedon, which would be weird because then technically Sarpedon is his uncle, like probably half uncle, but still, either way. Hercules' son feels like now is the time to mention how his dad has previously tried to sack Troy, because a lot of you guys probably don't know that Troy went through a lot of different sieges, and one of them Hercules was on. His son feels like now's the time to tell Sarpedon, like, my dad was here before, and Sarpedon basically is like, yeah, that's great, but I'm still gonna kill you, which is terrible trash talk. Like, it's just terrible. But it does instigate this fight, and so what happens is both of them end up attacking each other at the same time. So you have Hercules' son shoots Sarpedon with his spear, and it gets Sarpedon in the thigh. I'm looking down at my thigh, by the way. That's what I was doing. I realize that you can't see. But he gets him in the thigh, and it goes straight to his bone. Like, oh, it's brutal when you're reading it. But on the other end of it, when Sarpedon shoots Hercules' son, it goes straight into the guy's throat. So he's dead on the ground immediately, whereas Sarpedon, he's not dead, he's just in a lot of pain. And whilst the Greeks come over and they pick up Hercules' son's body to bring him back, the Trojans then come to pick up Sarpedon. But they don't take the spear out, so there's like a really weird description where he's being dragged to the sidelines and like the spear is just sort of like bobbing out of his leg. And as Sarpedon is being dragged out, we have Odysseus who's seen all of this happen. Now, Odysseus doesn't know if he should go and try and finish Sarpedon off, or if he should attack all of Sarpedon's men, because this whole thing with Hercules' son has to be avenged, basically. Athena can realize that he is debating this, but it's not his fate to kill Sarpedon. He's not going to be the one to do it, and especially not now. So Athena is then the one to sort of put into his brain with like some, you know, like magical influence. She puts into his brain that he should go and kill the other members of Sarpedon's army. So he ends up going on some killing spree and killing like 7 people. Literally on the spot, he just kills all of them. As that is happening, we then switch back to Sarpedon, who gets the spear, thank God, gets the spear pulled out of his leg by his mate. But as he's doing this, Hector walks by and he's like, Hector, I'm terrified that I'm gonna die right now. I need you to stay with me and to protect me because this guy has to tend to my wound. I need you to stay here and protect me, please. Please, I'm really terrified of dying. Hector hears this and just flat out ignores him and goes to stand on the battlefield. And you're like, that's one way to lead people, I guess. I certainly wouldn't make that decision, but that's the decision that Hector made in that moment, and you're like, oh. And as this spear gets pulled out of Sarpedon's leg, he's described in one line as literally dying and then coming back to life. It is a roller coaster of a line. It's described as like the darkness came over him and then he breathed in the light, and like, so for half the line, you're just like, no, not Sarpedon, we only just met him. And then he comes back to life and you're like, Jesus. So for those of you who want to know, including the guy that DM'd me, Sarpedon is still alive at this point. It's fine, he pops up much later. So as he's sort of reviving himself in the corner, as I said, Hector ignored him and went back onto the battlefield. This is the real proper time that Ares and Hector team up in a chariot to then go and murder all the Greeks. Like, they are just mental out there. They're going bonkers at this point. And Hera and Athena are obviously watching this. They're on the Greek side. They're watching this and they're like, what the f was the point of us promising Menelaus or the Greeks anything if Zeus was going to allow Ares down on the battlefield, the god of war, the god of active war, he was going to allow him down on the battlefield to do this mental shit with one of the Trojans. So Hera and Athena both go up to Olympus to go and talk to Zeus because they're like, this has to be handled like now. So Hera asked Zeus if he would be annoyed if they were going to go down onto the actual battlefield and actually put a stop to Ares. Zeus then says, yeah, that's actually totally fine. If you want to go down and Ares up, that's fine, go and do it. And as this is happening then, Athena is getting like a new dress on. So she puts on her dad's dress, so Zeus's, not like dress, I meant like dressed like in like attire. She gets like a new war attire. She puts on Zeus's war attire to get into battle. And then she gets a new chariot. So Hebe, who's the goddess of youth, she's like fashioning this like, you know, chariot for Athena to ride off into battle. And once they get that, then both Athena and Hera go down to the Greek camps and they just start yelling at them. Literally, Hera is like, who the do you guys think you are? If Achilles was still fighting, he would have never let the Trojans get this close to us. And surprisingly, that is all they need to get their shit together, apparently. So Athena then goes to find Diomedes and she goes to chat to him. He knows that it's her. Obviously, once again, no mist in his eyes. So he chats to her and she's like, remember what I said about how your dad is so great? Well, you have to live up to his reputation and you're not doing that right now. Like, you keep going into battle and then stopping. What is that all about? However, Diomedes then says a very rational thing back to her and he says, do you not remember the rules that you gave me for the battle, that you told me I wasn't allowed to fight any gods apart from Aphrodite, which I did, and Ares is on their side, so I can't fight Ares. Like, I'm confused as to what you want from me. And obviously Athena's like, yes, I do recall what I said, but now I'm changing it, okay? We're gonna go out there and we're gonna stab Ares and we're gonna do it together and I'm gonna come with you so it'll be fine, but we need to put an end to this. She then calls Ares a two-faced and she's like, get in the chariot, Diomedes. And so Diomedes was like, well, okay. And Diomedes goes to get into the chariot, and remember how I said his double act is Sthenelus. So Sthenelus, obviously seeing Diomedes get into the chariot, is like, okay, I'm gonna go too. So he, you know, hops into the chariot, and Athena does this weird thing where she like just pulls him out, but he like falls out of the chariot. She's like, nope, not today. And she steps into the chariot instead so that they can go out and fight together against Ares. Poor Sthenelus. This is like the most iconic moment for Diomedes, and Sthenelus was like told to stay home. The poor guy. But Athena, in place of Sthenelus, then are riding into battle with Diomedes. Athena, Diomedes in the chariot going towards Ares. Ares is currently in the middle of the battlefield. He's trying to strip somebody of their armor, another Greek of their armor, and he turns around to see Diomedes and he's just like, ah ha ha ha. Not today, Satan, not today. So he picks up his spear and he fires it at Diomedes, which obviously he doesn't realize that Athena, I don't know why he didn't realize this, that Athena was going to bat it away and be like, no. So literally Ares tries to stab Diomedes, it fails. Diomedes picks up his own spear and like throws it at Ares, but Athena helps guide it so that it hits Ares in the belly, like it hits him right in the stomach. And Ares is described as like collapsing and screaming with the volume and strength of 9,000 men. He's like, no! Which is so dramatic. Like, it's so dramatic by any means. But the fact that Ares, the god of war, is going to be this dramatic, I was like, oh, that's the reaction that you have? Not just like it's war, man. Didn't you know this? In light of being stabbed, though, Ares does not retaliate. He does not have the strength. So instead, he goes up to Olympus. He goes up to Olympus, and this is the first time that we see him speak as Ares, where he goes to his dad, Zeus, and he goes, stabbed and it really hurts and it's all his fault. Ares highlights that it's all Athena's fault. He's just like, you have this manic child and that's the reason why I've been stabbed. Basically, he highlights how like Athena is clearly Zeus's favorite because he's like, all of us get told off. You're not telling this bitch off. Like, look at her going down there and doing all of this terrible stuff to our own kind. And Zeus has the best response. Zeus turns around and he goes, don't you dare come up here and whine at me, you two-faced. And you're like, yo, what? And Zeus explains to us the reason why he, and also Athena previously has said this about Ares, and that's because Ares apparently at the beginning of the 10-year war, he had told everybody that he was on the Greek side, and now he suddenly switched to the Trojan side. So Zeus is like, honey, you made your bed, now you have to lay in it. Well, okay, he doesn't literally say that. In fact, he calls him Two-Faced, and then he says, if you were any other god's child, then you would have already been killed, like, you would have already been cast out, you would have been dropped. He says that, he's just like, you would have been dropped because nobody would stand for this kind of, like, behavior and betrayal on your part. So, like, you're lucky that you're my child, and I do want to see you happy, so go get cleaned up, and then come back here and wait till you're healed. And so that's what Ares does. Then he sort of stalks off, and he's like, fine. And Hebe ends up like washing all of his wounds, and then the healer god ends up healing Ares. So then he then stalks back at the end of the book. The book literally ends with Ares stalking back and sitting next to his dad and being like, and Athena and Hera coming back up to Olympus, because bear in mind, they were only down there in order to make sure that Ares came off the battlefield. So now they've done that, Ares glares at them and they like giggle. And that's the end of the book. So that was a bit longer. That was a little bit longer today. I'm really sorry. So if you need any help in regards to deaths, keeping track of any of those things, please check out GreekMythComix. That is the resource that I mentioned in the introduction episode to this series. Please go on there because she has a bunch of kill lists. You can follow like how many characters the other characters kill, how many people the other characters kill. You can track all of that stuff through Laura's incredible comics. So I would highly, highly suggest that you do that. So you can find all of those resources in the description below. But yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning in to book 5. I apologize again for how long it is, and we'll be seeing you next time with more videos here on MoAn Inc., but you'll probably have to wait a week for book 6. So we'll see you then.